It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions.
Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Friday, August 8th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Limited time, so I wanted to make sure we focused on some, I think, 2.5 very, very important topics. I only say that because I added a couple of points from the beginning that we'll get into in the next show that I just didn't want you to miss regarding Israel. Just on that note in general, it's sadly just more of the same. More of the same of U.S. government officials lying about what's happening. More of the same of Israel just continuing to kill anybody that they can, whether in food lines or starvation, rape, torture, murder, and the seemingly soon to be actually occupied in the sense of boots on the ground. It's always been occupied, but feet on the ground like it was before inside of Gaza coming very soon. I have an interview with Robert Inlakesh to follow up, and more writing from him coming for TLAV, by the way, as well. But I think in 2 days, hopefully earlier if we can do that, I'm having him on to discuss what he's seeing there and what he thinks is going to happen. Today, immediate topics I think I wanted to focus on, and possibly tomorrow, but the very next show, we're going to be getting into all of that and how it's going down. Today, we're going to be talking about some pretty interesting updates that we just covered. Very hopeful, I think, yesterday or day before. Yesterday, I had a great interview with Jimmy Dore, just kind of a conversational overview of what he's seeing about things going on. Probably putting that out tomorrow as well. But day before yesterday, talked about RFK Jr. and the $500 million pulled from mRNA contracts, which I really hoped would be what people hoped it was the beginning of. In and of itself, yes, that money coming away from anything mRNA, I also think right now, with what we understand about it, is a good thing. But it's not exactly what it looked like. And that's what I was worried about. And that's what's happened every single time so far, in my opinion. As I'll get to in a minute, even Steve from Slow News Day, or rather, and AM Wake Up that we join on Tuesdays, called it the bait and switch administration for obvious reasons. I almost used that in the title today. Sleight of hand seemed like a little more accurate to what's happening. But it's like with gain of function. We'll point out again as well that they didn't actually end gain of function. In fact, they claimed that they'd be the leaders of the versions they find to be appropriate. In the document, people pointed to saying it was removed. And sadly, it appears that's the same kind of thing in a slightly different way that we're going to get into today around what happened with the mRNA direction. Not really stopping mRNA entirely. Not even stopping all of the mRNA shots, despite the framing. Really frustrated by that, in fact, especially since the HHS post that people are referencing, corporate media and mainstream alternative media wide, states it. Interestingly, the quote they use, if you just continue the quote, it makes it clear that they're not stopping all mRNA. Why is everybody so dishonest about this? I think we all kind of know why, but recognize who else out there is covering it that way. Maybe because they didn't read it carefully. That's important for you to think about. Or maybe because they just don't want you to see what's happening. Or maybe they just don't care. But we're going to get into what's really going on with all that and why I still think it's just the alarming progression of the exact same problem. And kind of what we touched on in the last couple of shows about wondering whether is the future even, first, is the agenda actually just about mRNA vaccines? I don't think that. I think that's a step in regard to the agenda, the technology, the, biodigital convergence, all sorts of things we've talked about. Very real stuff. Then on top of that, though, are they done with it? Right? So is the next step going to be more mRNA vaccines? Or is this just about, like as I was saying, about a progression of the agenda, the technology, the research, and that now we're moving on beyond the original mRNA vaccine platform COVID-19 framing? Maybe, and not maybe, continuing the self-amplifying shots, going forward with universal platforms, not mRNA necessarily, but in ways we're going to get into that I find very alarming, and especially considering how most of us recognize that what we just went through and still continue to be in is sort of an experiment, and this adds to that. But we're going to go through where that's going and some things I want to make sure we call out coming beforehand and I guess currently beforehand and what's coming. We're also going to talk about some Epstein stuff that I think is very relevant to kind of catch up on where that's going. And again, this is not just about like the media coverage of this and how it's affecting Donald Trump. That's the surface level nonsense that's out there. And in its own right can be entertaining, if not important in certain ways. But as you guys know, this is much more about its interconnections with foreign policy. It's the blackmail network and used to infiltrate governments and who might be guilty of those crimes and who's trying to cover those crimes up. And you know our opinions. This is a government-wide dynamic, maybe not every single individual, but it's left and right for sure. And we know that. Most Republicans are now saying that because that's the clear reality, and the way that they're covering this up so far is really stark. It's obvious. It's in your face. We're going to go over some information that I haven't covered yet about what Epstein has said in the past and what it means and what other interviews have just uncovered about what Trump, with the possibility to make it as objective as possible about Trump involvement with actual crimes. We know his involvement with Epstein. That can't be denied. But whether that amounted to crimes, that's what we're going to get into partly today and for you to decide. But it's also about, the weird way that they're handling the release of information and what that seems to suggest. But important to go through all this so we all understand what the implications are of how they're handling this. Not that anybody knows for sure. Either way, and that's important to think about. We're also going to talk about a couple of points toward the end that have to do with a little overlap of Obama and that direction of it, which I still think is really interesting, the way that's kind of being conflated, and there might be something to that. Some points about how the CIA might have threatened Trump to not expose it, and how except Trump was the one that said the CIA has to get involved now, and we'll go over how interesting that is. But we're also going to end with an important part, just briefly highlighting it and where I think it's going around the debanking executive order that went out, which very well could be a positive step. I mean, again, like always, the partial aspect of it, if I'm reading it correctly, is still a good thing, just like with the mRNA thing. But if there's something more around it that is, used for manipulation, the best lies manipulations always involve truth, if not most of it being truth. That I think it might be something that is about, good example, and then we'll get into everything, like the woke conversation, where you have a situation where a lot of people, rightly so, and still to this day, we should be on guard against the whole woke left idea, whether it's about pronouns and whatever else. And then ignoring the fact, or like, just make it simple. The point is the right's doing a similar thing, but in a smaller way, right? About anti-Semitism, but it's hate speech and censorship and identity politics. And so the point was that it's still the same mechanism. And so is it really about all those things, or is it about just the mechanism and how it's applied and what that does for the government? Same with all the things we're talking about. And so in this case about debanking, we've seen how this has continued. We've seen it from the left administrations. Well, now we're seeing it a lot with Israel connection, anti-Semitism, hate speech, even U.S. citizens. And so this seems to carve out an area that seems to apply to things except what they've already claimed, or even like we just saw with the disaster aid. Their statement said, well, we removed that, but we still could do it because we just do this, regarding the legislation we passed around hate speech, we could still just remove, I'm paraphrasing. That's what they said in their tweet, which we'll show you. So the same thing with the debanking dynamic is it's clear that there's no carve out for that point. So yeah, they may protect you from debanking from the left going after you for pronouns, but guess what? Republicans calling out Israel might just fall into that trap. And so it's really always about trying to frame it a way that makes you think that they're the good guy when really it's just the same damn thing. But let's start today with a few quick points that I wanted you all to see that have to do with foreign policy that I will get into the next show. And I just wanted you not to see this. You know this already. Anybody watching the show likely already knows all these things, and it can even prove all these things. And these are just supplementary that continue to show you what's going on in some cases. UN experts this is today. Israel is exterminating the people of Gaza by any and all means. That is a direct quote from the United Nations. But if you're still trapped in and look, this is not to say I love everything UN and support all the things they do, including their globalist agendas. That's stupid. No way are we saying that, but the fact is the facts. And that is interesting that it's being stated by such the leading international body. And so the point is, you could prove that's happening, whether or not they're saying it, but the fact that it's being stated, if your only argument is they are Hamas, then you're one of these ridiculous people that nobody's listening to anymore because that's insane and everybody sees this. And it says, how is this not newsworthy? Think about that. Even the people who are claiming to support calling out the genocide now. You're not seeing most of the mainstream platforms go look at what the UN said today, even though that used to be what all of them did. Everything's being exposed right now because of this central thing. So recognize what they're doing, call it out. We're going to focus on it more coming up soon. It's just heartbreaking that this keeps going. Also, in regard to the occupation, Fox News, will Israel take control of all of Gaza? The whole thing they said was never going to happen. That was never the intention. It's only about Hamas. And all of us who cared and studied this and had any information, brain cells rubbed together, we said, yep, that's what's planned. Look at the Greater Israel Project. Look at what all the people in the Knesset are saying. And here he is going, we intend to. That's not a bombshell to anybody with a brain. But so many people have failed to recognize this because they listen to people who don't care about the truth. Glenn Greenwald says, who do you think will pay for Israel's full-scale occupation of Gaza and the ensuing years of guerrilla warfare? Even IDF chiefs are vehemently opposed, knowing it will lead endless insurgency and enduring fighting and death. It's not Israel who will pay for it. It's you. And on top of that, recognize that they're not getting the hostages out. What about the people that are still there? They don't care about them. They don't care about the American Palestinians or the American Britons or the Americans that are just there in general. Whether they're still alive, I don't know. Even NPR said in the beginning over 600 Americans were in Gaza before this started. Your government never cared about any of them. They sure as hell care about the American Israeli IDF members. They seem to focus on that entirely. But what's interesting to me is that the IDF chiefs are against this largely because they fail every time this happens. But I'm sure from Netanyahu's perspective, the more dead IDF members they can show the world, the more sympathy they can garner. It's my opinion. Bottom line, this is happening. At least they're continuing to frame it as about to happen. And, even Robert has argued that this seems insane for the very reasons we just stated, and that everyone seems to know that. But I think this is a desperation move. I think Netanyahu independently is moments away from going to prison if this stops. On top of that, the entirety of Israeli government is being seen by the world for what the Zionism Zionism have done to this country. And I think this is about trying to swing that back the other way desperately at the expense of their own people, just like the U.S. government's doing today to you. On top of that, 972 magazine, like a video game, Israel enforcing Gaza evacuations, which is what they're beginning to do, is force people into these areas, these concentrated areas, what they called them, with the interest to move them somewhere else illegally. And in doing so, popping shots, killing them left and right, the same they're doing with the food lines. Israeli media is calling it out, but your totally America First politicians don't care or are lying about it. It says, I do not think that IDF soldiers returning to the U.S. should be yelled at on the street, Kate Willett says. I think they should go to jail and be yelled at in there. So think about the information we just went over with the IDF member who had their house in the United States, the car burned and death to the IDF put in the street. You start to understand why people actually think that? Now, whether you condone those actions or not, I don't call for violence. I don't call for committing crimes, but you understand it. It's not about people being Jewish. And that's coming out all over the place. Now, we will come back to more of that in the next show. Also, didn't want you to miss from the peace president. Don't forget, by the way, there's now Starlink in Somalia, and they're bombing Somalia, and there's all sorts of things spinning out further, not going smaller. More spending, more government, more war, just like we told you it would be happening. I hoped it was opposite, but here we are. Trump directs military to target foreign drug cartels. Now, if you think that's a good thing, first of all, if that's even what's happening, it's not. Let's remember the war on terror, same thing. The war on drugs, the war, you can call it the war of terror. You can't really call it the war of drugs, but kind of, when you realize the CIA and the rest are shuttling drugs back and forth between countries for their own benefit at your expense, and then arresting individuals with a gram of weed in their pocket. The point is that this is not about drug cartels or a war on drugs. The U.S. government is close ally of Colombia, the leading exporter of cocaine in the world, but yet they pretend Maduro which is what this is really about, is the narco terrorist who's, is it about narcotics? Because you work with all the leading narcotics traffickers, but that's a different conversation apparently. This is about military targeting of drug cartels that they're calling terrorists because that's what they did with Tren de Aragua, MS-13. These are horrible gangs, many of which work with the U.S. government, by the way. The point, though, is it's really about using them and calling them terrorists to create the same thing they did with immigration, this legal gray area where they act like it's all insurrection, it's all invasion. On top of that, they're rationalizing going after Maduro. Again, it's every single president, as far back as you can look at that consistent policy. That's what this is really about. We'll come back to this the next show, but here is the insider paper. President Trump has signed a directive to the Pentagon to begin using military force, war, against Latin American drug cartels, because that's what Americans care about, right? Going after gangs in other countries. Is that America first, even if you think it's important in the long run? Simon Godek says, hey, Pam Bondi, how about a $50 million reward for the information leading to the arrest of everybody who effed kids in Epstein Island? Nope. She's given $50 million to go after Nicolas Maduro's head. Because that's what democracies do. They call for the killing of people around the world and pay for it. No, it's called mercenaries, guys. That's called, definitely not what they frame themselves as. Think about how wild this is. They weren't offering this much for Osama bin Laden. In fact, it's kind of the close to, was it 50 million they were offering for Jelani, who they now allow to rule Syria? These people are morally inept. I'm not talking about her. She's just talking head. She says whatever she's told to do. This is insane. And this is not what anybody wanted on either side of the paradigm, but here we are because your government doesn't care what you think. And Khaleesi simply points out, and it could be true, I believe it's part of it, this is why America put a $50 million bounty on the president of Venezuela. He says, who's the one that bombs their neighboring countries every day? Iran? Nope. The Zionist state led by Netanyahu. And he's right. But let's keep calling everybody else terrorists as these people lead the world into chaos. We'll come back to that. Now let's get into today. Did a pretty good job there. That was only 16 minutes for some opening points. Okay, this is really important. And I do think it's incredible how they keep lying to you. Like blatant in either hopes that you're that stupid or just that willing to blindly follow. Now, we just talked about this. RFK Jr. cancels nearly $500 million in mRNA contracts. I genuinely, one, had a feeling that this was going to go in a positive way, that there were going to be, even just to give us a head fake, to feign like we're going more, they don't even give you that. And not as far as I can tell, other than the contracts that are canceled. But let me explain why I think this was sort of the inevitable. We'll get into it. My point is that I hope that would happen, but also that this would be the beginning of a direction that a lot of us want to happen. Even people that don't support any politician still hope for the positive outcome of anything. So here's what we went into. Here's what we're going to get into today. The reality of this. Now, break it down quickly. What's happening here is that they are not stopping all mRNA tech. That's clear. It's right. It's right in their own document. It's right in their own post, by the way, from HHS. And they're not even stopping all mRNA shots. So mRNA in other areas of the field, which that's still the same problem, but specifically to main creators of shots, not even their individual ones, but the ones we've already talked about. I believe it's pronounced Arcturus, as well as this one here, which is, where was it? It's right here somewhere. I'm just blanking on the, how am I missing this? Oh, I moved the page. That's right. It's right here. It is Amplitude Therapeutics. Now we're going to come back to both of those. I'm going to show you why both of those are not being stopped. And those have shots for COVID-19 that include mRNA very clearly. So first, what Time Magazine reported, and this was on the 5th, it says that it will start winding down mRNA vaccine development. So RFK's announcement, which I keep trying to find any real momentum on, like I'm looking into these 22 that they still don't give you any indication on, at least as far as I can tell. The 22 contracts they're canceling. I don't doubt those are happening. At least, I always question everything, but I get the indication that that's probably going to happen. But we should wait for it to happen, as always. But 22 of them, and no one's releasing what they're going to be. I'm sure we'll find something. But winding down is my point. So they're not stopping these things. Now, that's important first because of what a lot of us understand what RFK told you. They're deadly. Not Trump, who I'll show you in a second, yet again, still tells you that they're safe and that warp speed was the best thing ever that everybody agrees to. He just said that again. But winding them down. So if this is, and we know it's as deadly as RFK told you it was, if this was arsenic on the shelf, would you go, well, we're going to wind down the arsenic sales, but you can get it for a minute, limited more time? That doesn't make any sense. But it goes on to say, we're shifting that funding towards safer, broader vaccine platforms that remain effective even as viruses mutate. That's what they're announcing today and yesterday. That's the universal vaccine platform. Now, there's a difference, obviously, between mRNA and even these old styles, which I'm going to get into. It's the whole cell ones, which are problematic for a lot of reasons. Those are the ones that people tended to get sick from, that had high levels of side effects. I'm going to argue less than mRNA. I think that's easy to prove, but worse than the ones we've been using between those things. And the people from Maha, in a lot of ways, I would argue the majority don't want any of these things. We're convinced that he would pull back on basically all of it. The child schedule, at least look into not just mRNA, but every vaccine, because that's what he's told you. The entire industry is broken. And yet here we are. not changing these things. If you think they're somehow tweaking every vaccine that's still being used, they're not. These are the same ones that he called out before. Yeah, but you could argue he can only manage one thing at a time. He can't change everything at once. Fine. I get that. I'm not even arguing that. Maybe that'll happen, and when it does, I will praise it. But at the moment, this seems like not really what people are making it out to be. Even in mRNA in particular, but in general, that the vaccine platform, including what Fauci told you was the next step, is now beginning to happen. It says HHS said on Tuesday that some final stage contracts, and what's funny is this gets dotted, which there's reason for that, will be allowed to run their course to preserve prior taxpayer investment. Okay, right. So you can keep buying arsenic because, well, you paid for it. Okay. Well, if this was about life and death, which it is, that doesn't make any sense. That's the same as before. It's going, well, it's not like it's freedom of choice. Well, it's not the same thing when you're forcing us to pay taxes, using that money to produce dangerous things, and then acting like we have to let that be on the shelf. It's not the same thing. If you grew this yourself, then you could choose to eat it if you want. That's your freedom. The idea that you're acting like it's their choice, our hands are bound because you have to be able to choose to take this thing and die or not. Especially when they're misinformed about what the risks are, that doesn't make sense. But it says, and they're using your choice. It's funny how they go, it's about freedom of choice, and then take that away from you everywhere else when they're not even giving it to you here. But it says, but that no new mRNA-based projects will be initiated. I somehow even doubt, well, here's what's funny. That's not even true. Now, what they mean is vaccines. And I doubt whether that'll even be the case. But the crazy thing is, I'll read you directly from HHS's statement where it says that they will continue mRNA products in other fields. So this is how most of these platforms are framing it, making it sound like that's happening. Why is everybody doing that? I mean, you know why most of them are, but it says the agency said that other uses of mRNA technology within the department are not impacted. Well, so this is funny. It says it right afterward. I'm going to come to it. It's right here where it says that on their page, but it says no new mRNA-based projects will be initiated. Doesn't that seem to make it sound broad? But then they go on to say next, the mRNA technology within the department is not impacted by this. So there are continuing mRNA projects. It also said that BARDA will shift its focus to, quote, platforms with stronger safety records and transparent clinical and manufacturing data practices. Great. But I don't know why you would assume that. These are just words on a page from a politician. So maybe it'll happen. And when it does, we should go, yay, great. And then double check to make sure we're not being lied to by those objective, transparent research. The point is that these are just statements, guys. People love at this point to cheer when the guy they like says the thing they hope happens, and acting like that means it's already happening. It's just politics. It's partisan politics. But it goes on to say, adding that technologies that were funded during the emergency phase but failed to meet current scientific standards will be phased out. So they're killing children, but we'll let them taper down. That's just so stupid to me. In favor of evidence-based, ethically grounded solutions, which is not what's happening right now, in my opinion, like whole virus vaccines and novel platforms. Well, novel platforms and so you're talking about something from the 50s that most people have gravitated away from for obvious reasons, and then novel platforms, which is the same problem. And I'm going to show you why. Whether mRNA or not, we're getting into the problematic. We'll show you a 21-valent shot. 21, like bivalent, but 21-valent. These are all happening. And I don't know why this is, mRNA is only one part of this, guys. Remember that there was a multitude of problems that were parts that carried over from other types of scientific vaccination processes, and it's not what it appears to be. Here's what it says. HHS winds down mRNA vaccine development. And it says under BARDA, by the way. I'm pretty sure not everything they do is managed under BARDA. So all this we basically already know. They announced a beginning of a coordinated wind down of mRNA platform stuff. We reviewed the science, listened to the experts, and acted. Terminating, again, I really want to know the exact 22. What are the 22 vaccine development investments? Show these vaccines to fail to protect against respiratory infections like COVID and flu, which is the truth. He's right about that. So it says, while some final stage contracts, and look at what they choose to ... the things that matter, e.g. Arcturus and Amplitude, will be allowed to run their course and to preserve taxpayer investment. So when you mean run their course, so that means you're going to let them make them and sell them. And then what? One contract and then we're going to stop it? No, if you think that, I don't think you're paying attention. Certainly could be. If you're going to allow them to make these shots and put them out in the world, they will continue to be sold. And it says, no new mRNA-based projects will be initiated. Then it says, other uses of mRNA technology within the department are not impacted, which we already read. So you tell me why that feels, and funny how this part of it, the bottom part of it, is being left out of the conversation. He says, let me be absolutely clear. HHS supports safe, effective vaccines. Well, the FDA with Prasad and McCary just told us the science around the old COVID shots were safe and effective. They're the ones involved in this. And it says, for every American who wants them. That's why we're moving beyond the limitations of mRNA and investing in better solutions. Does that really make you feel like we're aware of how dangerous these things are and going away from them, or that we're getting beyond them, we're growing beyond them, to things like self-amplifying mRNA shots? Because that's what's actually happening. Okay, first of all, Arcturus, not around COVID, is one of the main ones we told you about. This is the self-amplifying bird flu shot. That's ones they just told you are not going away. And as far as I could tell, I was going to say, this one is mRNA as well, but it's a self-amplifying mRNA shot. That's what I think this is about. Now, you'll find it interesting that the groups that they kind of carved out as the ones we won't stop right now are all self-amplifying shots. I think it's as a kind of a sleight of hand to make it feel like we're stopping the things we want. We heard what you said, and then not really stopping them. And in fact, going in the direction that they're focused in on. We always told you self-amplifying was going to be the next step. Here we are. It's funny how much of what we said early in the COVID illusion is exactly what continues to happen. And a lot of us, not just TLAV. Now, this is the one I wanted to highlight on. This is from before. This is 2024. Self-amplifying mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. This is one. This is Arcturus. They're not stopping these. There you go. Now, there's other ones. And these are all ones we've covered, by the way. This is just what Google says about Amplitude. It says the Amplitude COVID vaccine refers to an mRNA-based vaccine candidate developed by Amplitude Therapeutics. More than one, guys. It's being developed as part of a broader initiative by the Department of Health and Human Services to explore next-generation mRNA vaccine technology, specifically focusing on a trans-amplifying mRNA approach. Right, we're going to move beyond the limitations of those old-school mRNA shots. We're going to dive into the trans-amplifying mRNA approach because that's not the same thing. While HHS is winding down, many mRNA vaccine development projects, Amplitude's project, as well as Arcturus's bird flu vaccine, are allowed to continue to completion due to existing contracts. Because their hands are bound, guys. Didn't they just pull an mRNA COVID shot from Moderna even after the funding? Yes, they did. So that's bull. I almost cursed. Just frustrates me how obvious this stuff is. Here's one of that we're referencing. It says new research to investigate next generation trans-amplifying mRNA vaccines. Scientists in the U.S. are set to test a new vaccine approach that could overcome some of the challenges associated with the latest mRNA vaccine designs, the limitations, and more rapidly create faster, more spreading, pandemic-busting vaccines in as little as 100 days. Cool. So nothing's changed. It's only gotten worse if you focus in on what they're saying. 100 days? So what's different? Rapidly produced platform mRNA shots. Those are happening. With up to $1 million in funding from CEPI. Right. See, it's, all the same groups that we were all calling out, and it's not like these are, it's part of the government, but realize that this is stuff that is not slowing down, in my opinion. Researchers at Amplitude Therapeutics will perform preclinical studies that assess whether their trans-amplifying mRNA vaccine approach could provide a simplified alternative to the self-amplifying mRNA vaccine technique being used today. Really, being used today. Well, let's not forget, if you go back to the original Pfizer documentation, you remember what I showed you right in the beginning, 2020, that the way they listed the BNT 6212. Damn it, I'm forgetting now. It was so on the top of your head when you're covering this. So the original Pfizer, they had BN2 and now I can't remember the two Pfizer shots, and the number, letter, descriptor they gave for it. The one that they listed, the one that ended up being used predominantly, was listed originally as self-amplifying. Still there. So the point is, they went on to call it something else, but that's what it was listed as. And that's the number that they now say is associated with the ones that were always being used. So maybe it's always been the case. It's worth considering. Now, here's one. July 1st, 2025, Moderna's mRNA 1010 shows efficacy in phase 3 seasonal flu vaccine trial. Now, as far as I can tell, and unless they release the full data on the 22 that they're claiming they're stopping, this does not appear to be one of them. In everything that I can find. That's a limited statement because I haven't gotten everything. They haven't released everything. But from what I can tell, this appears to be one that is almost there. So in the same logic of not stopping ones they're committed to with money, this one feels like one of those as well. The point, they're all over the place. And they're continuing. And this is about the seasonal flu vaccine. Now, the Vigilant Fox highlights that a HHS advisor spoke to Bannon. And guess what he's saying? He confirmed that you could see, and you could see the pain on his face because he was somehow forced to say the things he came on the show to say. Like, what a weird way to frame that. So he goes on the show, clearly. Like, so you act like Bannon tricked him into saying it. And first of all, RFK has publicly said all of these things. So this, to me, feels really weird way to frame this. And it adds to what I think. That really, they're trying to make it seem like we're calling it out, finally. This explains why RFK effectively shut down all mRNA vaccine funding. No, he didn't. See how easy that is to miss, to manipulate? The point, guys, is that he's claiming that there's no benefit. That really the main point that we all know, I'm just trying to go quickly, is that right here, in other words, the cure was worse than the disease. Oh, weird. You mean like what all of us were screaming in 2020, at least worrying about that, and Trump promised would never be the case, and here we are? The point is that, yes, we all see that. So then why are mRNA vaccines still being allowed to go forward? Why would this guy come on Bannon and say, oh, they're so bad, they kill everybody, but we're going to let them keep going? Now realize, the shots are still going, but also mRNA tech in other avenues is still being allowed to go forward. This doesn't make any sense unless you realize, in my opinion, that this is him going on the show to make it feel like we did it. And he's even grudgingly admitting it. How would that even make sense? Why would he grudgingly admit something that you're telling us that team wants? It doesn't line up. It does if you realize they're trying to play you into this direction to make you think that you stopped it, just like gain of function, by the way. Which, by the way, I'll show you in a minute. Or just highlight, here's the show. We did this on gain of function head fake. This was on May 9th, 2025, and I already described it. They didn't really stop it. They lied to you. And the document they put out claiming that everyone pointed to as proof that they stopped it, said right on it that they weren't stopping it. People follow, man. And here is Donald Trump. After what we just showed you, what we're being told from RFK's advisor, make sense of this for me. You already know. He said it 100 times.
The driving force behind Operation Warp Speed.
I also want to point out quickly, why has nobody asked this question before? You know how long this question has been valid and how it's been very right. It's right on the surface. The contradiction between what he says and what all of his base thinks. Wouldn't that be easy, low-hanging fruit for Democrats that want to expose him, right? But only now, after all this time, has it come out, because they're not really fighting each other at the end of the day at the higher levels, because it's one government playing you into this, whether they even know that or not. You just have to be able to look at history and recognize how easy that is to see. But they finally ask it.
Behind Operation Warp Speed, these mRNA vaccines that are the gold standard.
Right.
Now your health secretary is pulling back all the funding for research. He's saying that the risks outweigh the benefits, which puts him at odds with
Research
the entire medical.
Even right there, by the way, she made it sound like everything mRNA was stopping, right? It's so easy to mislead people these days.
He's saying that the risks outweigh the benefits, which puts him at odds with
Research
the
on
entire
what?
medical community and with you. What is going on?
Research on what?
Into mRNA vaccines.
Well, we're going to.
Do you really think that he didn't know what he meant? It's being really ridiculous. It's getting ridiculous today. How often Trump is playing stupid. He acts like I think he now thinks it gives him some kind of legal bound, like distance from it. But it makes you look stupid. It makes you look like you don't even know what's going on in your own administration. He keeps referencing to, I know what you know. I read it in the papers. He damn well knows what's going on, guys. He literally just, let me finish this first.
Which puts him at odds with
Research
the
on
entire
what?
medical community and with you. What is going on?
Research on what?
Into mRNA vaccines.
Well, we're going to look at that. We're talking about it, and they're doing a very good job. And, that is a past. With Operation Warp Speed.
Yeah. Why are you still talking about Epstein? That's old news. That's the past.
Was, whether you're Republican or Democrat, considered one of the most incredible things ever done in this country.
Do you agree with that? Democrat, Republican? I mean, here's what's funny. Democrats, still in a large degree, want to think this was positive and say the vaccines helped, but not when Trump does it. Not when Trump's vaccine, because they're children, right? But the point is, nobody actually feels that way, guys. That's insane. Like this narrative he's putting out to claim that everyone everywhere agrees that Trump saved the day with Operation Warp Speed. It just gets conspicuous. It's right there. Everyone feels that's weird, but you get the team sport followers. It's like Zionism and what's going on in Israel. They'll always hold the line, but it's not not even close to the majority, in my opinion, right now.
The efficiency, the way it was done, the distribution, everything about it has been amazing.
Wow, amazing! Killing children, amazing driving people to disability, amazing all the things. It's all amazing. All the horrible things that we all know that the whole world's called out. It was all amazing. How can he keep saying that?
But that was now a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
And we're on to other things. But we are speaking about it. We have meetings about it tomorrow at 12 o'clock.
Now, I looked it up so far. I can't see anything. I can't even see that there was a meeting that took place. But what's interesting is that seems to suggest like it's not completely defined. It's not absolute, because he said twice now that, we're going to talk about that. Doesn't seem like a ringing endorsement, does it?
And we'll determine. We're looking for other answers to other problems, to other sicknesses and diseases. And I think we're doing really well. Yes.
Great. Not an answer. And ends with, we're the best, always. I'm good. Next question. It's just so funny. But at the end of the day, he only really put doubt in that conversation. And on top of what we already know, that shouldn't surprise you. But the real point, he continues to scream about how great the ejections are, how Warp Speed saved the day. Nobody, especially his base, does not think that. And that was the premise of the question. Now, Mary Talley Bowden, by the way, who just was on Joe Rogan and was just calling, one of the main things was exposing all the different shots, mRNA related, that were in the pipe work. And I think it's way more. I think she said 27 that she could see. That's more than 22, as we're trying to highlight. But there's more that aren't even in this, the kind of BARDA related management. And that's important to think about. Now, on a quick side note, by the way, it's funny that somebody made this really good thread about what she said on that show. And then it even got exposed by the fact checker. People were just like literally word for word copying it, posting it, and then sharing it, and going like, invest here. And this platform is just garbage with that stuff today. And it's something that they claimed they wanted to stop before. Now realize I'm not even calling for that. The point is that they said they would do that, and this platform is just a bag of manipulations at this point. But Mary Talley Bowden points out, after the same clip we just showed you, asked about ending it all, and Trump's response, we have meetings about it tomorrow, actually 12 o'clock. Now, guess what? Gary Delaney, director of MAHA implementation, was just fired. Why? As Mary's claiming, fired for defending Kennedy's decision to end funding of all mRNA shots. Now, this very well could start, maybe Trump didn't know. Maybe this is genuinely something that he didn't want to happen and he stopped it. I don't know. We'll have to wait for more information. But Mary says, thank you, Gray, for having the integrity to speak out when others won't. I think that's really interesting. I mean, at the very least, why would he be fired? That's Trump going around RFK Jr. to fire somebody he put in position. That seems pretty strange. This just doesn't add up with the way people want it to look, like the people that are desperate to make this all about winning. Now, this is where it gets even more alarming, especially because this is something that people like Rick Bright, Fauci have told you is coming, is the future, before the COVID-19 timeframe. And so you have to ask the question about whether all of it was always leading in this direction. So True Stream Media said RFK Jr. told everyone straight up what his job as HHS secretary is. And I'll play the clip for you, is to restore trust in the vaccine program. Very different than changing the vaccines. Now, that's what people want to hear. That means he's going to change it all, make it safe, and then make sure we know that. Maybe, maybe not. This is where it comes to the point of choosing to hear what you want or believe what you want when it's somebody you hope or believe in. You hope is, what you think or want to believe in. When in reality, it doesn't matter what you think. We should question them all the same way. That's just logic. That's intelligence. Question them, especially those you believe in, because you want them to succeed. Hold their feet to the fire more than anybody. That's not what happens usually. He's a government vaccine salesman now, they claim. That's what True Stream Media says. I agree with that. Maha Action says, RFK Jr., we're developing a universal vaccine at NIH, which is a vaccine that addresses the entire phylum of viruses. Yeah, that sounds safe. Remember the whole point about giving, I'll play that clip in a second, actually, about, if you give the wrong vaccine that addresses the wrong antigen, then bad things happen. Well, what if you take an injection that has, 21 different antigens in it, 21 different valents, or one that's supposed to aim at all of them somehow? It's very, very weird. Now, I'm not claiming to be an expert on vaccinology or any of this, but I think it's what we've researched in the past and what even they have said, what RFK Jr. has said, suggests this is not the right step. But we should be questioning it at the very least, I think. Here's the clip.
Now we're developing a universal vaccine at NIH, which is a vaccine that addresses the entire phylum of viruses. And so it's a vaccine that mimics natural immunity, and it is effective against any kind of mutation. So it doesn't drive the virus to mutate. And it could be effective. We believe it's going to be effective against not only coronaviruses, but also flu.
Think about that. And this is what we told you was always coming. This is the platform that we already reported on. We already told you this was coming. Again, demonstrating our value, guys. This was reported. Right now, it's a big story because they came out and they posted it. We were telling you this was coming well before this, that it was going to be COVID-19, it was going to be flu, because they told you that if you were paying attention.
And it's going to be a much safer and much more effective vaccine.
So if it's all of these things, how do you think that's happening? Right? I when these things actually, if and when, I hope not, become circulated and there's data, which I could probably find if I dig deeper right now when I have more time. I want to look through this entirely like we did during COVID. I want to look at this. I want to look at this trial. I want to look at the actual posted information about these things and look at how that's possible. How is that happening? Right? What is the logic behind it? But as people, there's a lot of people who I hold in high regard in this conversation. Sasha Latapova says, do you know that this, quote, universal flu platform is using whole viruses? It is. Grown in aborted fetal cells? Isn't that something that Republicans have a big problem with? May want to think about that. And uses beta propoiolactone, which is a known carcinogen, genotoxic, mutagenic agent, a teratogenic, causes reproductive harm, environmental toxin by the EPA, FDA, EMA. Yeah, sure sounds great. Seems like a great step. You should ask whether this might even be worse than what we're talking about. I mean, it's experimental. You understand this hasn't been done before. So this should not be something that ends up being again, we're getting ahead. We'll see how it comes out. Is it something that's put out like it was last time? Is it something that is tested in a certain way? Is it forced because of circumstances? We'll find out, won't we? But I'm not feeling good about where this is going. Sure as hell, Maha should not. Slow news day. It's like I said before, Steve Poikonen from AM Wake Up. Since day one of Trump 2.0, he says, I've been calling it the bait and switch administration. Not because I want it to be true, but because that's the only thing they've shown us and continue to show us. I flatly agree with that. It's true. Here's 5 times August who feels the same. In January, pull the COVID shot. He's saying what we were saying, everybody. In February, pull the shot. March, same thing. April, May, June, pull the shot. That's what everyone was saying. Pull the COVID shot. Then in July, here's a new COVID shot, which may very well be one of the ones in that 22 category, but we're not being told yet. And there's plenty still continuing. So the point is they did put out another one, which seems ridiculous. Whether or not they eventually pull it back, that was still HHS. Them in August. Oh, also, we're working on one big, beautiful mega shot for all the things, which would conclude a COVID shot. Doesn't seem to line up. Dr. Jane Ruby rightly points this out. Now, we've covered this clip more than once. As she says, Fauci was going for the universal flu vaccine. He was all about it. Many times he was talking about this. When somebody said, as a pharma maker, why would I want a product that was only given once? And I'll play Fauci's reply. Now, here is the show that we did about this. And this was back in May 4th, 2025. One of the points in the show was RFK's universal flu vaccine platform. This came out May 1st. We covered this back then on May 4th. And this is exactly what we're talking about. And I'll go through it next. And it's exactly what you just heard. But here's Jane Ruby pointing out what Rick Bright and Fauci had to say. And I forget the guy's name. It looks like Michael Spector. And here's what they had to say about the coming universal flu shot that's now being rolled out by the Trump administration.
Representative of industry, but I'll pretend I'm one. I make a flu vaccine every year, and it sells and it protects people to the degree that we
so
can
you have
expect.
no incentive. Right.
Why the hell would I go spend $400 million to do this thing, which may be great, and then if it's really great, you give it once or twice or 5 times.
And that's where the federal government comes in.
Yuck. It's funny. You know, the point is, we'll find a way to coerce you into it. Like, that's the logic. And it's the same thing they were saying before. The documents I've shown you about, you know, health is more than influenza, the WHO put out, or the HHS document about talking about how they're lying about the flu and pneumonia overlap. I mean, I've shown you these things 100 times on this show. It's very easy to see that they've been manipulating this for a long time, and anybody honest has been calling it out for a long time. Now, this release about this, HHS, NIH, and we're going to get into some overlapping points I find very interesting about this, that they also have patent investments, you know, sort of like just exactly with COVID-19 and Fauci that we all had a problem with, and now it's happening again. NIH, HHS launched new generation universal vaccine platform for pandemic-prone viruses. NIH in-house development of universal influenza and coronavirus vaccines. Protection against multiple strains of pandemic-prone viruses like H5N1, avian influenza, and coronaviruses, including SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-1, MERS, and CoV. So all that's packed into this thing. I think most people, especially those that were hoping for something different from RFK, are not going to be feeling good about this. But this is even more interesting. Trump, this is from May 13th. So remember, we're talking about the same universal platform. Trump's administration's universal flu vaccine project puzzles scientists. A lot of this is about how great mRNA is, and we can't believe but it says vaccine experts are perplexed by the project the Trump administration has launched to develop a universal flu vaccine, which has long been a goal, though an elusive one in medical research. Dubbed Generation Gold Standard, just the same old thing, the project is aimed at creating a flu shot that doesn't have to be updated every year. So that's the real thing. Whether you need 15 of them or not, we don't have to change this. It's a forever shot that you take and works 60% of the time, which turns out to be 5% of the time based on the numbers. Whatever it turns out, that's kind of the way this always goes. But let's wait to see some facts. The bottom line, though, is that seems to be the real push, is that we can just make it forever. And that becomes and it's just all profit from there forward. And it's way more than just profit when it comes to this stuff, like we saw during COVID-19. And it says, the project also aims to produce a vaccine that could protect people against other respiratory viruses that could cause a pandemic, such as bird flu and coronaviruses. Now, Dr. Bhakdi talking about the mRNA shot was important, recognizing that it doesn't work against respiratory. Now, this is arguably not an mRNA shot, but we'll have to see how this actually pans out. The point is arguably the same, though. I've heard plenty of experts make this case about flu shots, that if you're giving a shot in the muscle in your shoulder, that it really, the point is it should be in your nasal passage, your mucosal, there's better ways to have it affect a respiratory illness. So the argument is that this also in your shoulder, which is what we're talking about, wouldn't have, this is about something else, is what my point is getting at. And it says, such as bird flu coronavirus, it says it extends vaccine protection beyond strain-specific limits and prepares for flu viral threats. Which, my argument, same with flu, the same thing, guys. It's why you think we need these things in the first place. Not just today's, but tomorrow's as well. How would you possibly think that even scientifically makes sense? But I'm not an expert. We'll find out. Using traditional vaccine technology brought into the 21st century. That's what they said. Quote, I'm glad to see that this administration is still wanting to invest in developing next-generation influenza vaccines or respiratory vaccines in general, says Ted Ross, director of the Global Vaccine Development at the Cleveland Clinic. This makes you feel good. First of all, the project plans to use an approach that would involve injecting people with a whole flu virus that has been killed with a chemical to render it harmless. So we're told, or maybe they made a mistake. But remember, historically, this is why one of the reasons why these things were pulled back, because there's openings for that to be a problem. And it says, but is still capable of stimulating immune system, even though they claim they've killed it. Most vaccine experts consider the whole killed virus approach to be antiquated. And more than that, though. Whole dead virus vaccines tend to produce more side effects, including high fever, seizures, that especially can frighten parents, Poland, Ross, and others say. Now realize, like I said, my opinion, I think, which is easy to prove, these mRNA shots, at least the ones we just saw, shockingly more side effects. But in comparison to old, the ones we've been using before COVID-19 and these whole ones, they have historically at least been shown to have a lot higher issues. And it says, and then there's the price tag, $500 million. Look at that, which is a huge amount, especially at the time when federal health research funding is being slashed. The money that was originally earmarked to help explore a variety of technologies for next generation COVID vaccines. Okay, so let's unpack that really quickly. $500 million in May was earmarked for the next generation COVID vaccines, right? So we're coming along, we're getting closer to this, and they go, we're slashing $500 million in COVID-19 contracts. So secondarily, we're starting a universal flu platform that previously we were told would cost $500 million or flu COVID-19. Okay, so is this just the same damn thing? Kind of seems that way. So if it's the generation of COVID-19 vaccines and they're still doing self-amplifying COVID vaccines, but yes, they're over here slashing off some old mRNA things they don't want to use anymore, they're using the $500 million they claim they slashed from COVID and shots to make a universal platform that makes COVID shots. So nothing really changed other than where they've kind of carved out what they're focusing on. So just like every other topic, like Steve was pointing out, it's a bait and switch. They're still doing it. Maybe not exactly the same way or as many, but I don't even know how we can prove that. The point is they are clearly doing it with the same money for the same purpose, but folding in flu too and everything else apparently. It says another aspect that's raising eyebrows is the fact that technology called a beta propiolactone inactivated whole virus platform, more platforms, was developed by NIH scientists. Great. So you mean the same NIH that we all were calling out before they took over this administration? Dr. Matthew Mamoli and Dr. Jeffrey Taubenberger. I half expected to see Fauci's name right there. Mamoli was recently named as the principal deputy director of the NIH after serving as Trump's acting NIH director during Fauci's reign. That's what that means. Taubenberger was recently named acting director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Taubenberger holds a patent on the technology. So here we are again with an NIH scientist who has a profit motive about this very thing. In addition, the strategy was picked without independent public review and based on only very limited preliminary testing. Great. Here we go again, ladies and gentlemen. Last quote, the BPL platform is fully government owned and NIH developed. The announcement says, this approach ensures radical transparency. It does it? Public accountability and freedom from commercial conflicts of interest, except the one we just read for you. The point, guys, look, I'm not going to pretend like we have more transparency from Pfizer, but if you for 1 second think that the government is now, because the government's doing it, it'll be transparent. It's like the biggest oxymoron I've ever heard in my life. They are it's their policy to hide everything, even sometimes what doesn't need to be hidden. Pfizer is just the same damn thing because it's a public-private dynamic. It's a fascistic world we live in. And I mean that only in the sense, in this case, of the corporate government overlap. Here we are. Oh, and then I think the last part was, oh no, I read that. So also just want to point out that we've been talking about this a long time. If you want to go back and watch them, this was from 2022. Showing you that this is where it was going to go. Not because we were guessing, because we could see where the things were pointing. The multivalent, which is where we are, universal mRNA flu vaccine, November 25th, 2022. Now, it's not like I'm psychic. It was already being talked about. My point was we were discussing how we felt this was going to be the next step. And this is clearly, that's correct. This one is from 2023. mRNA universal injections are, quote, the future. That's what they're claiming. That's my point. That's what the quotes are for. The future, even as they alter, maim, and kill many who take them. Why? Because that was the plan. A great one to watch. The point was, this was the plan. They knew this was the plan, and now it's being carried out from Trump to Biden to Trump, or even before that, when you understand how long it's been going on. But they already knew that was the case, and we covered it back in 2023. Here's May 2023. That one was January. The new mod RNA ferritin nanoparticle universal flu injection, right? So I bet you this spins out into a bunch of other projects. Well, let's be clear. This was already happening. In 2023, we showed you the study. One of them is MIT. There's a Rockefeller study in the technology, but there is an actual trial ongoing, if not already being produced, for a mod RNA ferritin nanoparticle universal flu injection. Now, I'm not going to dive into all that because it's crazy. If you want to check out what that means, look at it. The crazy part is even the Rockefeller study showed you that the ferritin nanoparticle injections can quite literally be used to control the way you move, control the way you think, control the way that you care. I mean, or relay information. It may sound crazy to you, but this is an MIT investigator. This is from Rockefeller University, and MIT and plenty of others that have investigated this. It's not fake, at the very least. If it is, it's a grand manipulation that they put out all sorts of research on and show you the studies, but that's what they're claiming at the very least. Now, last couple points on this, as I mentioned, here's Merck. This is from June 17th, 2024. The FDA approves Capvaxive, however you say that, for pneumonia, a 21-valent injection, which as far as I can tell, appears to be continuing. And so I'm wondering whether there's some kind of overlap to this research and where it goes. But recognize this is, I don't think for a second that this is even stopping or even slowing down. I think they're recalibrating their direction based on what the real agenda is. Here's one that Orwell shared, that one as well before it. Quadrivalent influenza nanoparticle vaccine, or the Flumos V1. All of these are coming forward right now. Now, I want to point out really quickly, like one of the only people that I could find, I basically was organizing this setup with the ones we'd had, Arcturus and everything. And I went on to Twitter to see if I could find anybody else, like just kind of searching for it. And this, I'm not familiar with him. I started following because of this. But this seems to be like the only guy that I could find that is actually covering what we just told you, which is that this is, as he says, don't be fooled. They just opened the door to the next pandemic. He says, yes, it's true. HHS terminated 22 projects. Well, again, technically not yet, but the movement seems to be happening. But it says, citing failure to protect from COVID and the flu, but it says this jab, Arcturus 2304, is self-replicating mRNA, and it is continuing. So I just want to point that out, that there are people that, it doesn't get very much reach, funny enough, more than mine, which is funny. But the point is that John Fleetwood called it accurately. So shout out to people that are actually seeing it. Well, I'm not, again, never endorsing everything everybody does. I just only saw him today. But, think about that. That people out there are seeing that, yet the ones that get all the attention and all the rage are all the people that are trying to deceive you, because that's how these platforms work. Gain of function, head fake. We already pointed that out. That's the way these things go. They lied to you about it. Now, on Epstein, and this shouldn't be that much longer for the show today, but this is important. I mean, it's just like the starting of the other one. It even has the same background. I think it was in the same press conference. Trump again calls the Epstein files a hoax. Now, I want to be clear about this, guys. It's the game that's being played about how, he really only means that they took things out of it, and so part of it's a lie. Certainly possible, but let's be clear. All we have to go on is what he says. We can't go, but this is what he really means, which is what Jones always does. And the point is that he said more than once, the whole thing is a hoax. He said that exactly more than once. So if your effort is to go, well, I think he means this, well, that's your opinion entirely. The reality, first of all, is that he's said it many times, which should be enough for people to be objectively like, well, that's where the data stands. That's what he said. We have no other indication. But the fact that he is, the idea that he is clearly involved in this because of all the overlap with Epstein, which we'll go through in a minute, it seems really weird for him to say, like even once was ridiculous, and he lost a lot of people for it. Then he called them weaklings and cowards. And then it kind of floated away a little bit, and people didn't really, but they pretended it did. And now he comes out and says it again. It just shows you that there's something very weird going on here, especially when they're the ones telling you that there's more information, that they're asking Ghislaine Maxwell about things, and yet it's all a hoax. And then, of course, he calls the calls for release, or he says that the calls for releasing more information are BS, even though that's what they told you was about to happen. But on top of that, he asked them about what we reported yesterday, about the fact that they're having a meeting about how they're going to handle this. And they all laugh and call it fake news. Like, here's what's funny, and this is my indication, and I'll play it, or my thought. Trump starts to move to ask J.D. Vance something, right? Before he even explains what he's about to ask, they all start chuckling. Almost like they talked before about how they would do that. You can decide for yourself. The point is, I find it absurd to think that they're not very clearly damage control gaming this out. But because they all laughed, it must be true. And all the mainstream alternative media guys will tell you absolute fact. Must have missed this one. Let me grab that real quick. So I still find it really, really amazing that they're even still, pushing back on something that they use to build their entire, like think about how embarrassing this must be for the Dan Bonginos and the Kash Patels, right? Who build their entire, weird following on this exact thing. And then basically turn right around and tell you it's all fake. He killed himself, and it's exactly what we've been telling you isn't the case this entire time. Trump saying
Is Vance hosting a gathering this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
Is he working on what?
Is he hosting some kind of gathering of top advisors this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
That's a Newsweek. I think it was Newsweek, right? But anyway, it was a pretty widely reported story.
I don't know. I could ask you that.
So they're all chuckling about this. So they've clearly addressed this beforehand. Like it could just be that it's a fake story, and they laughed about it. That's possible. But I get the sense that it's something else, especially because, and I'll wait, I'll read my comment.
I don't know of it, but I think here's the man right here.
I saw it reported today, and it's completely fake news. We're not meeting to talk about the Epstein situation.
Okay, well, how about one possibility, which, by the way, I could prove to you this has happened many times. Clinton did it all the time. That what if it was planned? They saw the report. Then they said, never mind, let's not do it now because they reported on it. Then they can stand there with a straight face and it's actually true and go, that's not even about to happen. You're all a bunch of fake news liars. Even though it was definitely about to happen. And now they're going to meet at somebody else's house. And, it's like, that is the way they play this. If you don't recognize by now how, not just that they lie all the time, all of the government, but how bad these people are in particular about lying to you. It's clumsy. It's really embarrassing, especially the Bondies and Hegseths and gnomes that aren't good at it in the first place.
And I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country.
Oh, really? Think about how stupid that is. Guys, do you realize how dumb that is to say? There are points in this history where things were technological growth, like post-World War II. Are you going to pretend there's not a 6-month period in there with massive growth and massive technological advancement that and you're telling me this 6 months, which has been clumsy and broken and everyone's upset about it's just not the truth. And this is why I laugh at when the people out there only say this and agree with it are the people that you already know are going to cheer. What he could come out and say it's Tuesday and they go, exactly, he's right. What a great guy. That's what they do.
And that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bullshit.
And he cusses. Very interesting. I mean, not like I even care. He can say what he wants. But in a sense of decorum, I've never seen that before. I've never seen somebody in that kind of a setting cuss. Not like it even matters. I just think it's interesting. I think it shows desperation. And I think what ultimately he's using is the thing that we're pointing out, all of us. They're desperate to get you looking anywhere else, so they're trying to distract you with all this nonsense. And so he goes right to the same thing because I think these people can't think their way out of this. It's crazy to me. Anyway, the main point, he said it again. It's a hoax. It's all a hoax. But if you listen to Jones, oh no, he meant this and this part and they lied and that's what it's going to, or at one point it was that he made it up to go after the deep state. Secondarily, the next day it was that the deep state's using it to blackmail him. Remember how fun that was? Then the third day it was something different. Now we're kind of at the same point, at least the team sport politics are trying to gather back their narrative. The point, guys, is this is obvious. That they're trying to lie to you everywhere. And that's why honest people are like, this is uncomfortable. We all see, I want to support him. Some of them do, but we're not dumb. We see that you're lying. Now, I said, JD Vance comes out and goes, Benny Johnson comes out and says, JD Vance shuts down false reports because Benny knows. Right. JD Vance says they're false. So therefore it's absolutely false because Johnson's a good journalist. And it says about a secret Epstein meeting at the top White House officials. Okay. It's fake news. Certainly could be. I simply said, right, because it's totally not spectacularly obvious that they're trying to deflect from the story at all costs, and absolutely not embarrassingly clear that they're game planning on how to work through it, obviously. And clearly they laughed. So, fake news, you're a joke. It's just kind of weird to watch these people get more and more obviously trying to do that job. Now, the transcript, the audio, I just use this to remind me. This says Trump faces Ghislaine Maxwell conundrum. It's what it's about from yesterday. But unless it came out just now, up until the show started, they hadn't released the transcript or the audio, which I'm starting to think neither are going to come out. But if a transcript gets released, it's meaningless because we don't know. They could type anything they wanted. They could cut parts out like we already see them doing, like they cut out of the video they gave us. My point, though, is it hasn't happened yet, even still. So I just think that speaks volumes. Oh, wait, I forgot. There was breaking news. There was one thing that came out already. Very important. Ghislaine Maxwell.
Trump did nothing, at least in my presence, that would be cause for concern. He was always a perfect gentleman, a elegant dancer, a gifted poet. He spoke Cantonese fluently. At one point, he threw a football 300 yards, and it somehow boomeranged back to him. I saw a grizzly bear charge him, and he delivered such a withering barb that it retreated in shame. One night, Donald performed an emergency tracheotomy on Bill Gates, saving his life. He did a chiropractic adjustment on Stephen Hawking, and Professor Hawking was able to skip all the way home. The point is, the man is a saint, and I would like to not be in prison.
Obviously, that's not real. 2 points to make. One, it's just funny that like this is where people's minds are going, that it's like, okay, you know, not like the joke of typical Trump kind of stuff. Like you can't just come out and be like, we won. It's going to be like, we won more than anyone's ever won in their entire lives and the history of the world and all of the universes combined. You know, that's kind of his hyperbolic ridiculousness all the time. The point is that, you know, through a football 300 yards, and it's like, it's just a joke about how that would be the case, that, you know, not just convince her to say he wasn't guilty, but to make it about all more. But the bigger point that I want to make is that, you know, just get ready for what might happen. We're in the world of deep fakes, guys. They could easily put out something that would look, I don't think people could even tell the difference. So just question everything as always, but don't assume based on that it has to be false. Consider that it could genuinely be true, but just recognize that we're in a pretty dangerous time when it comes to manipulations like this. Oops. So David Icke highlights exactly what I'm thinking on this as well. And this, Adam also says, Ghislaine Maxwell, which we reported in the last show, reportedly told the DOJ she never witnessed Trump engage in any concerning behavior. See, this is really weird. They keep doing that. We read it to you directly from the exact quote. And I think ABC, or no, I think it was CBS was the only one that quoted. She said I didn't see him do anything in her presence. That was what the quote was. And yet everyone weirdly has contorted this into, and even put quotes on it. Well, that might be Adam. Never witnessed Trump engage in any concerning behavior. That's not actually what she said, which is interesting because they now make it like this broad, he's never done anything wrong, when it was more about that she saw, which leaves open that it was maybe something happened when she wasn't around, right? But even the same thing, she never witnessed. It's the same kind of point, but I think it's interesting to say no concerning behavior. But the point is, this comes after Trump gave Maxwell limited immunity and moved her to a minimum security prison, which we covered already, in a very weird thing that he tried to act like was totally normal. Every expert on the topic has said, no, it's wildly unusual, especially since he used the Bureau of Prisons to transfer her and not the marshals. There's something weird going on, and we all sense that. Gave her a box of materials. She claims to have sung on 100 people, but it turns out they were 100 people that they asked about. I guarantee it's all the Democrats. I mean, that's how I look at it. The point, David Icke says in plain sight, before our very eyes, on public display, monumental cover-up. It comes to something when you are so, it comes to something when you are so deep in the mire that you can't even do it correctly. When your only option is in broad daylight. That's what I'm sensing too. This feels desperate. But interestingly, is the immunity, like I said in the beginning, limited immunity. Not yet complete immunity, but limited immunity about everything that she said. So if she screamed about all the crimes, then she'd be immune from those things. That's the reality. And so now she's been moved to basically the club fed. That's what they're calling it. And I didn't witness anything that Trump did that was wrong. Well, that seems to contradict what she said before. Let's look at that. So a few places have reported it, and it apparently comes directly from this book, which I wasn't able to find a transcript of. I'm going to try to see if I can find it somewhere, but the book's called Ticking Clock, Behind the Scenes at 60 Minutes, written by Ira Rosen. So multiple platforms, these are just two of them, but multiple mainstream platforms reported on what the book said. This one's just covering the book in general and says, Ira Rosen's 60 Minutes book has stories galore. And it lists off a bunch of them. And it says, St. Martin's nice, relaxing bedtime read, Ticking Clock, Behind the Scenes at 60 Minutes by Ira Rosen is upon us. Stories include, and it lists off a whole bunch of stuff. One of them, Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein's alleged private tapes on Clinton and Trump, which does appear what she said in this interview, which here's Daily Mail. Ghislaine Maxwell admitted Jeffrey Epstein did have tapes of Trump and the Clintons after she was tricked by 60 Minutes producer, that's Ira, in 2016. It says Maxwell told 60 Minutes producer Ira Rosen in 2016 that she didn't know where the tapes of Trump were. And it says, quote, "I know the way you people think." This is her speaking. "If you do one side, you must do the other. If you get tapes on Trump, you have to do Clinton." So more than once, she insinuates that there are tapes on Trump. Now saying that there's not. That's worth pointing out. Now, maybe she lied then. That's just as likely. Maybe there's a reason she wanted to lie about Trump then, and maybe not now. Maybe she sees Trump as the way she can get out, and she's lying now. You have to be honest with yourself and consider all of these things. The point, though, is it's becoming very clear that this is just, I shouldn't be new to anybody. This is what the U.S. government does, or what government does, that we're being manipulated. I'll include that so you can check it out for yourself. Oh, and let's also include the clip from the Daily Beast podcast, Fire and Fury, which we've played for you already, that Epstein states, you can decide if he's lying or not. We're only reporting that Epstein stated this, that Trump was one of his closest friends for 10 years, which seems the opposite of what we're being told, right?
So how do you know this?
That was closest friend. 10 years.
It's low on the audio, but you can see the transcript. Daily Beast interviewed him, and he says, I was, you see right here,
Donald's closest friend.
I was Donald's closest friend for 10 years. Now, you maybe could turn around and argue that Trump didn't consider him a friend, but somehow Epstein felt, or at least claimed on this podcast, that he was Trump's closest friend for 10 years. And then you look at all the photographs they have, all the videos, they're laughing together. It takes a really special kind of willful ignorance to pretend that they weren't friends. Now, that's not the same as saying he broke the law, but it seems much, much more likely, doesn't it? The many times he was on the flight logs, maybe he didn't go to the island. I don't know. He also has that part of his island that's about, 13 minutes away from Epstein's island. So maybe he could have gone there instead and then traveled over. The point is, we don't know. But that contradicts everything we're being told. And on top of that, people just seem to get really upset when you point this stuff out and go, "That's not true." And I did online with somebody today, and I'm like, so what do you mean it's not true? He just said that. I'm not claiming I know anything other than what this guy's saying. But are you claiming Epstein was lying? If so, why do you think that? Because Trump said, okay, so you're taking Trump at face value. Like, it just shows you there's a willingness to see this one way. Both of them could be lying. One of them could be lying. Anybody honest will consider all those things. On top of that, Midas Touch reports that Annie Farmer, an Epstein survivor who testified against Ghislaine Maxwell, just revealed on CNN that she wrote a letter with her concerns to Deputy AG Blanche about Maxwell and actually received no response. And now they moved her to Club Fed, and it seems like something is about to happen. She says neither she nor other survivors have even heard a word from the DOJ. So let's piece this together. If the survivors aren't being contacted and they're supposedly investigating this about whether she was involved, it does not seem that they're doing anything other than covering this up and working with Maxwell. Wouldn't they be involved? Especially since they tried to reach out and says, here's some data information I have about Maxwell. Doesn't seem to matter. Again, this is for people that need to hear that. I think everybody, especially conservatives right now, are starting to feel really uncomfortable about how obvious this is. Now, this is a great article from Bloomberg. Here's a look at what the FBI's Epstein files would reveal. And I wanted to go through this. It's really interesting, actually. Now, this is from August 8th, from today. An index from an 8-year-old FOIA lawsuit shows that the Bureau is withholding bank and phone records, photographs, communications with foreign government agencies, sure we can piece together who that is, and other revealing material related to this 2006 investigation. Just since that's the point to make here, I'll end with this as well. Let's open this here. This clip went around, and I think actually today. The article was, I was Epstein's butler. He's one of the only people one of the others that went to jail for being involved with all this. He says, I was Epstein's butler for 18 years. There's no way he killed himself. That's what he said. Additionally, the picture happens to show him wearing an IDF logo on his shirt. Not that that necessarily proves anything, but it just seems relevant. Now, it says, I think there's a part in here I was going to read. Now I start here. So it says neither confirm nor deny. Really? It says the intense secrecy shrouding the Epstein files dates back to President Trump's first term. This is very relevant, especially for the point that Trump had the opportunity to put this stuff out his first term. Allegedly before it was altered, or I guess you could claim Obama did it before that, but I don't think that even makes sense necessarily with, there could still be an overlap. The point is that during Trump's term, a lot of this went down. And I think it's the extension to today. Back then, it says the FBI blocked the release of the documents during his last administration from its investigation into Epstein. Since then, a pretty interesting and infuriating chain of events has unfolded. It dates to April 20th, 2017, Trump's first administration. That's when James Robertson, an editor for National Enquirer and Radar Online, filed a FOIA request with the FBI seeking all documents relating to the FBI's investigation and prosecution of Epstein. A week later, the FBI denied his request, saying that the Bureau could neither confirm nor deny the Epstein records even existed. And even if they did, Robertson's request for records on third parties bumped up against 2 privacy exemptions. They were the exact same exemptions that the FBI used to justify redacting Trump's name from these files today, which this person wrote about in last week's edition of the FOIA files. Isn't that interesting? So the same logic they used to keep it secret before is the logic they applied to redact Trump and his other people's names they didn't get to find out from those files. Now, I said at the time, there's no way that makes sense. Trump getting his name redacted, is he a victim? There's no logical reason that would happen other than the obvious. Now, says, however, in its response, the Bureau held out an option that was untethered from reality. It included a privacy waiver and explained that Robertson must first obtain permission from the subject of his request, Jeffrey Epstein, before the FBI could even consider releasing documents about him. Think about that. Ultimately, the FBI's argument in denying the records boiled down to this. Epstein was never charged with a federal crime. Therefore, the release of any FBI records revealing his name could, quote, engender comment and engender comment and speculation and carries a stigmatization concoction, whatever that even means. But are we concerned about stigmatization of a sex trafficker? Not me. According to the exemption cited by the FBI when it refused to release the documents. Robertson, who later co-authored a book about Epstein, sued the FBI a month later, arguing that the Bureau was wrong in its decision to withhold the records. In October 2017, the FBI did start to release a sliver of the investigative files on Epstein. Ultimately, over the course of nearly 3 years, it processed a total of 11,571 pages that the FBI considered responsive to Robertson's initial request. However, it released only about 1,200 pages, which were heavily redacted, most of which, by the way, were already posted all over the internet. So thinking about this, 11,571 pages that the Trump administration had combed through only gave you 1,200, most redacted, almost all of which was already posted. So this is the body of work that they don't want you to see. That's what I think. What they decided shouldn't be released under Trump's purview. The FBI posted, and in case you're new to this, in no way am I suggesting that only Trump, it's our government, Biden, Trump, I think it's the whole damn thing. Not that I know for a fact that every one of them are, the point is they're all part of this corrupt organization, all of them. And it's very clear that it's not unique to left or right. The FBI posted those 1,200 pages in the Bureau's online FOIA reading room called the Vault. To be clear, the FBI wasn't acting particularly generous or proactively transparent when it released this narrow set of Epstein documents to the Vault, which the point is that some people would love to frame it as, see, Trump was trying to show you the truth. Not really how this went down. It was forced to do that. They were forced to release this, and then they redacted it all, and it wasn't really anything new. Under the 2016 FOIA amendments, if an agency gets 3 or more FOIA requests on the same subject, it is required to release the records to everyone. If there's any doubt, that's why the FBI released those files. There's the telltale series of numbers at the bottom of each page, which corresponds with the federal docket number of Robertson's FOIA case, so you can prove it. And they have the screenshots throughout here, but there are links to the actual documents. What's surprising, though, is that the Epstein documents posted to the Vault are the very same documents that have been screenshotted and shared thousands of times on social media amid a torrent of renewed interest. So the point is, it's all information they knew, and that's probably why they selectively picked them out, used them to make it look like they were giving information when it was all stuff they knew was already public. But a lot of people didn't know that. And a lot of mainstream alternative media pretended they didn't care anyways and said, it's all story, we knew it. Blowing the story off, the lid off the story. Same thing they did with JFK, MLK, and though it just wasn't the truth. Now it says withheld in full. So what happened to the remaining 10,371 pages of documents not released by the FBI? Well, here's where the plot thickens. The processing of the Epstein files ground to a halt in 2019, still in Trump's administration, when Epstein was indicted on federal sex trafficking charges. The FBI explained to Robertson that his attorney and his attorney, Dan Novak, that it couldn't release any further records on Epstein since the man was now being prosecuted. Ongoing investigation. In particular, the department said that the remaining records would be withheld in their entirety due to an ongoing investigation, and because disclosure could impact Epstein's ability to get a fair trial. But wait, a month later, Epstein allegedly died by suicide in his jail cell while awaiting trial under Trump's administration. Wouldn't the fact that the defendant was no longer alive mean the documents could now finally be released? Not so fast. The FBI did release another 46 pages that it determined wouldn't interfere, and he's now dead, with the ongoing proceedings, mainly news clippings that were already out. But it stopped there. The Bureau's FOIA team said that even though Epstein was dead and federal prosecutors dropped their case against him, records still need to be withheld because of ongoing law enforcement proceedings. Fast forward to July 2nd, 2020, when it became clear that the FBI meant, or what the FBI meant. That's the day Epstein's former girlfriend and close confidant Maxwell was indicted on federal sex trafficking charges. Now, the FBI said in a letter to Robertson's lawyer, it was required to do the same thing, withhold all the information which could interfere with Maxwell's ability to get a fair trial. During the course of Robertson's ongoing FOIA legal battle, and to be clear, those aren't unfair arguments, but you can see how this cascading thing continues, and the real core, the consistent thing is not giving you anything that changes the story. During the course of Robertson's ongoing FOIA legal battle, Maxwell was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Novak argued once again that the documents should be released. At this point, there's literally no reason that shouldn't happen. This time, since the case was resolved, but in a development that borders on the absurd, the FBI and the federal prosecutor on the case, Maureen Comey, who Trump just fired, argued against disclosure because Maxwell was appealing her conviction. So the same logic. Last month, Trump fired Maureen Comey, the daughter of James Comey. Now, that does appear to be, like, you could look at it as he got rid of her because she's corrupt. But think about it, guys. They removed her. So I don't know how I would argue that it doesn't then stop her from being accountable. But you see, what's interesting is, like, let's say a CEO takes over a company. What's fascinating to me is that then they can be legally held accountable for things that happened under the previous CEO. So I don't know how it exactly works with that. I should look into that. But the interesting point, though, is that it could just be he's corrupt, get rid of them. Even though we can see tons of corrupt people in this administration, it seems more likely to me that this is an issue, that she is involved with the cover-up, and it's important to push her out to the side, especially since she's overlapped with the Democrats, and we have to make it look like we're not on the same team. You can decide what you think on that. Also included in the docket was a declaration from Michael Seidel, and the then head of the FBI's record office. He explained the Bureau's latest rationale for withholding Epstein files pertained to numerous sensitivities, such as the surveillance operation conducted by the FBI to obtain investigative intelligence. You know where this is going, right? It's all concluded. It's over. But, we did special things in that investigation that we don't want everyone to see that we do. Give up all of our tools. So the point was, you could have made that argument the last time, the first time, and said, we're never going to release this ever, because then it exposes our special investigatory processes, which I don't buy for a second. If that information was revealed, Seidel said it could allow current and future subjects of investigations and other potential criminals to develop and utilize countermeasures to defeat and avoid different types of surveillance. You mean like they can't piece together how you guys surveil us now and do their best to avoid that? What a ridiculous argument. It says, in the last week's FOIA files, they reported that Seidel was essentially forced out of the FBI over Attorney General Pam Bondi's botched rollout of the Epstein files. So yet another person involved with this process getting pushed to the side. That doesn't seem like a positive thing to me. Last year, a U.S. district court, it could be if you somehow think that this is Trump working through the it's so easy to go, oh, those are the deep state, and he's fighting through them to get this out. Let's see how it turns out. I find that to be quite naive and childish to even think is possible, my personal opinion. But let's see if it turns out that way and they actually get released and we can go, yay, it turned out that I was wrong. But when they inevitably don't, not in the way we think, then we have to recognize that there is something else going on here. Last year, a U.S. district court judge ruled in favor of the government and agreed that the FBI didn't have to release any additional Epstein records, given Maxwell's ongoing appeal. Novak has since appealed the decision to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, this is something I learned, actually, the Vaughn Index. Like other reporters, they write, I've been scouring the Radar Online docket in search of any details that might shed more light on the 10,000 pages the FBI withheld. Drawing on my own experience, he says, from filing nearly 200 FOIA lawsuits against government agencies, he says, I know that when a case comes to a close, an agency is required to produce a so-called Vaughn index, which, you know my opinion, I don't think they're required. Like, they're required to do things, but I don't think there's plenty of examples where governments just disregard everything. Trump's doing it every other day right now, or just their administration, just the U.S. government. But the point is, supposed to follow that. Like with FOIA, there's so many ways they manipulate this, but it says, which describes the documents it withheld and redacted, and the justification for doing so. The Vaughn Index the FBI produced for Radar Online is 170 pages, and it contains some pretty revealing details about what it is hiding inside the FBI's Epstein files. Now, for the podcast, again, they have the screenshots of all the documents, which are, publicly out there. You can find them for yourself. Among other things that the FBI processed but withheld was information provided by confidential sources, letters addressed to then U.S. Attorney for Southern District of Florida, Alex Acosta. I think that's monumentally important, who cut a plea deal with Epstein in 2008 that saw him avoid federal sex trafficking charges. Now, remember, when he got the first Trump position under Trump's first administration, before they shuttled him to the side, probably for the same reason, they asked him point blank about Epstein, and on the record, he said he was told to leave it alone because he was connected to intelligence. And that was enough. Good, come on board. That's what happened. So he's involved to a very serious degree. And it says subpoenas to MySpace agents, handwritten notes, photographs, grand jury subpoenas, intelligence analysis, and a wide range of correspondence related to FBI victim assistance program. All of that included in the stuff they don't want you to see. And here is a detailed explanation of what was in the other categories of documents the FBI redacted and withheld. It says, and these are all just these, you can go through these yourself. Child Victim and Child Witness Rights Act. These are information withheld. That's the logic, by the way. There's so much going on in there that, the problem is that you just can't ever take their claim at face value. But who knows what they claim is the reason. The reason doesn't make you understand, or it doesn't show you what they're hiding from you. But this is even more intriguing. The index included correspondence with foreign government agencies, a large volume of subpoenaed phone records, and a lot of bank records. So right there, out of everything we can see in this, they're telling you that in the information that they currently don't want to give you, that they already currently withheld from you through multiple administrations, including Trump's last administration, which is where this ultimately started to be withheld, is what foreign government agencies are working along with Epstein and the entire thing. We all know what this is, guys, and I think that's a huge issue, especially since Israel seems to control Trump's administration. More accurately, governments all over the world. Separately, the FBI created a spreadsheet that contains a detailed breakdown of the documents it processed. Importantly, it reveals that the FBI conducted 55 interviews with witnesses, victims, and potential investigative targets between 2006 and 2008. Now, does this sound like they don't have names of people that were involved? Right? There's even a mention of the black book right here. It says the interview summaries, known as the 302s, and the names of all the interviewees were withheld with the exception of one, Alfredo Rodriguez, Epstein's former butler, who you just heard told you he knows he didn't kill himself. That's his opinion, but he's saying, I worked with him for this whole time. He didn't kill himself. Who was sentenced to 18 months in prison in 2012 for concealing Epstein's black book. Right. So that, again, a compilation of people who are utilizing their services, whether or not it's one single list or that you can pile into a list for us. That's what people are demanding. And they tell you it's a whole hoax by the Democrats. Something else that's noteworthy from the Vaughn Index, the FBI's investigation into Epstein remained active after he pleaded guilty to state charges of solicitation in Florida in 2008 and was released from prison in 2009. Some of the documents that were processed and withheld are from 2011 and include dozens of photographs, agents' interview notes, and third parties and documents provided to the FBI by confidential sources. The FBI doesn't typically close investigations, which is weird to me. Usually they keep an open file and continuously submit that file, probably because they can always say it's an open investigation and say we don't have to talk about it. That's my opinion. When the FBI does reach a formal conclusion in a case, they prepare what's known as a case closing memorandum. There is no case closing memorandum in the Epstein-Vaughn Index, which indicates that the case remains active. Now, I guess you could argue that's because of Maxwell, but there's a whole level of this that starts to feel like a lot. I'm trying to be, I think we all sense what this is. That doesn't mean we know that Trump's guilty or that what exactly is covering up, but I think it's obvious. We can all see that there's a cover-up happening. That's my opinion, but I think it's very easy to see that there's something very, like, it's simple when you find them getting caught lying about things. That shows you there's something going on behind the scenes. It's not brain science, rocket science, brain surgery. It's put them together. So where does it all leave us? It says, even as Trump supporters and now lawmakers from both sides of the aisle continue to demand further disclosures in the Epstein files, the Trump administration has made clear it has no intention of releasing any further materials. That should outrage everybody. That's why Radar on, and to be clear, that doesn't mean that he won't tomorrow. But as of now, he said that many times. Now he's calling it a hoax again. That's why Radar Online's FOIA lawsuit might be the best shot, after all, of getting a glimpse inside the controversial records. There's one potentially interesting twist on the horizon. Last month, Trump administration officials visited Maxwell in the federal prison we reported on, 9 hours apparently over 2 days, where she'd been serving out her sentence. After 2 days of questioning, Trump wouldn't rule out the possibility of issuing her a pardon. Now, actually, I remember, I don't think they visited her there, did they? They brought her to another location, which wasn't the prison. Yeah, pretty sure that's the case. So that's funny that they get that wrong. And either way, the point is, visited her, gave her a box of materials. They claim that she identified 100 people. Remember that they now let out that was people they asked about. So it feels very contrived to me. But the pardon hangs in the air. Last week, she was moved to a minimum security prison in another state, raising further speculation about whether she might be freed. If Trump pardons her, Radar Online's FOIA case could become very interesting. Yet again, but I wouldn't hold your breath, he says. It's pretty clear now the FBI won't part easily with those 10,000 pages. And why do you think that is? End of the day, if they do pardon her or something concludes here, you know what we should be demanding. And I doubt it will actually happen. Now, Thomas Massie is really pushing this. He says the Epstein files are not a hoax. The speaker adjourned Congress. They all went to Israel to avoid the topic. But we will not forget, he says, when the House returns from August recess, I can begin collecting the 218 signatures required to force a vote on binding legislation to release the files. You want my honest opinion here, which I always give? I think that he's going to have a hard time getting that because I think probably a lot of people in Congress, I doubt there's 280 people who are not compromised by these things. That's how I look at it. So we'll see what happens. But I think it's interesting that he is calling this out. Now he says, I'm leading the fight in the House to release the Epstein files. Is this why a billionaire who appears on Epstein's black book and regularly donates to Speaker Johnson and NRCC is paying for ads against me? That is pretty interesting. His super PAC is deceptively named MAGA Kennedy. Guys, this is ridiculous. Johnson, Trump, they're like all rallying together to get the one guy trying to call this out removed from Congress. The guy that doesn't take AIPAC money, right? The guy who clearly, I think that's wild. A guy is behind this, is in the black book, John Paulson, and has his super PAC named MAGA Kennedy. It's very obvious. MAGA Kentucky, which is where he is, a member of Congress. I think it's insanely obvious. I think we all see that. And there's Epstein wearing his IDF uniform. Or, for the podcast is the sweater. Now, a couple overlapping points to finish here, and then I want to just list off some stuff about the banking thing. An interview Alex Jones has put out, it says, deep state FBI operatives reportedly attempted to blackmail Kash Patel if he fired a senior FBI agent celebrated for defending the deep state. So this is just sad. I mean, I struggled through most of this, and it's hard. Look at the comments. I mean, it's hard. This is look, this is a guy saying what he thinks. And I don't even think this is based on fact. This is him saying things, which if somebody who, by the way, is working for the government. And what is the argument? That Trump's name is only in the files because Epstein they basically reached out to find the other guy it was that Epstein listed Trump as one of the other people who's been manipulated by the law like he has. And that's why his name's in there. This is absurdly stupid. There's 100 other reasons. Flight logs, friendship. I mean, it's bad stuff, guys. And yet it's not even getting much reach compared to what he normally does. His audience is not buying this, but this just keeps happening. Same thing. And this is just another post of it. It's what they kind of do every time. FBI whistleblower exposes where Trump is in the Epstein files. That's the specific part I was talking about. That's what he mentions. And Propaganda Monitor says Alex can't stop executing the most absurd mental gymnastics to justify and run cover for Trump. I mean, a lot of these people are people that follow and support their platform. The overarching idea, though, is that cash was threatened and everyone's being like, it's suggests that they're, I mean, so what is the argument here? They took control of everything. They're in the White House, but yet somehow they're still being controlled by the deep state, which is not impossible. But why wouldn't they be calling that out? You could, well, they'll kill. Okay, well, then why are they here if they're not afraid? Like, are they fighting for us or not? Are they fighting deep state or not? Or is it all a big lie, which I think you know where I'm leaning on that. And this says, at the same point, this guy says, stop listening to Alex last month. Can't believe he's still defending Trump. Now Vance is pulling Epstein files is a hoax crap. Unbelievable. This guy, James, says, you are not going to be able to clean Trump's name. Just give it up. I mean, you read for yourself. I'm not just picking these selectively. It's like the whole damn thing. It's crazy to me. Here's another one. I was actually just talking about this guy a few shows ago, just how fun. And now I certainly have a different opinion, like a more evolved opinion. It says, is Andrew Schultz right? Guess what he's arguing? That the CIA threatened to kill Trump if he released the Epstein files? No, is it possible? Of course it is. Is there anything to back that up? Nope. But we're sure as hell going to throw it at you and go, what do you think about this completely baseless allegation that completely wraps it all up for Trump in a nice bow? Well, here's what I continue to think is absurd. More than once, it's like the CIA bad that Jones puts out, but then fails to point out that Trump repeatedly says the CIA must get involved before it's too late. Okay, well, I mean, at some point you have to stand back and recognize how inconsistent all of this is. I said the same thing then when Jones says, huge, both shooters were connected to the CIA. Then why did Trump say, get the CIA involved? This tweet, by the way, again, if you try to search for it, it doesn't pop up in the search. Check it out. I think there's a reason for that. But either way, to me, that the same CIA Trump said should get involved and the same CIA that RFK said killed his uncle, it doesn't make sense unless you realize, so the CIA threatened him to not put this out. Is that possible? Obviously. But if that's the case, then why wouldn't this be called out? Or if it just continues to go in the direction of we're going to comply with the deep state, well, then he's captured by the deep state. And say that then. But it's not. It's we support him and we're fighting for him, but maybe that's why. And it's like this game is played to hide from you that they're completely lying to you all the time. The overlap quickly about the Obama point. So right now, as far as still, there are subpoenas that went out for all, Comey and Brennan and Obama and all the Clintons about Epstein, about coming in to talk about Epstein, which, if you really think that after all we've seen that these people are anything's going to happen, I hope it does. They're all criminals, but I don't believe it. But here's what keeps getting interesting. Now they're expanding it even further. Now it says the Clinton Foundation and money laundering operations could finally be exposed. We already went through this. I bring it up all the time. When the people from Boston tried to expose their pay for play, I've never seen more evidence that was, it was so obvious. Documents, everything, and nothing happened. They listened to it all. Everybody was floored, and then nothing happened. They're still free. Nothing happened. And they even were allowed to continue until they eventually shut it down, but that was probably by design. The point is, exposed the money laundering operations about the Clinton Foundation. So you think it's going to happen now? It was the same point before. And it says the Russia collusion hoax and the Epstein case move forward with new subpoenas. Oh, wait. So, and here's the point to make it quick. Conflating as if all of them are interconnected. I told you, I sensed this before it even came out. People are arguing that all of these, the Russian Epstein, now there's plenty of ways that you could tie all the things together, especially that you can see that the government left and right were involved in all of them. The point is that we're, I think, now trying to kind of blend all this together, probably in a way to distract you from the Epstein point. But now it's about Russiagate too. Well, Russiagate was a hoax, and everybody knows that, a manipulation, clearly. But now you're gonna pretend that they're gonna arrest them now, even though Trump told you Obama has immunity. It all seems so silly to me. But here we are, in a way, distracting you yet again from what's happening, but getting you to think that what they're being pulled in for has to do with Obama. And it doesn't seem to be the case, but it's all the same names. The House Republicans subpoena Clinton's DOJ and officials for the Epstein probe. That's the only one you can find. Not the article. Look at the DOJ. No subpoenas, as far as I can tell, have gone out for anything other than Epstein. But they want you to think, don't worry, it means all of it. Guys, that's one of the main points I want to make on this little point. If they wanted to go after them, let's say for the hoax around Russiagate, well, then the best legal avenue you should take is to focus in on the most provable parts of just that one charge. But no, these people are going, don't worry, we're going to charge them for the Russia hoax, Epstein, Haiti, Benghazi, all of it, human trafficking, laundering, it's all going to come down. If you think for 1 second that anybody's going to make a case stick in front of a court of law, in front of judges, about all of these cases simultaneously, you're lying to yourself. Not only, I mean, it's certainly possible to make a case that they are connected, but you're not going to make this stick. It's near impossible to jam all these things together and make this case stick, and you're going to go to jail for these 17 things simultaneously. It doesn't make sense. Charge them independently, but go after what you can prove, put them in jail for one crime, and then charge them next. But the reason they're doing this, in my opinion, is to make sure that it doesn't actually happen. Even if it even comes to court or comes to Congress, it's going to be done in a way that creates a situation that they can never hold accountable for. It happens every time. You know this too. You've seen it yourself. Now, lastly, this came out. Benny Johnson says, President Trump signs executive order banning banks from debanking Americans over their political or religious beliefs. And I said, restrictions may apply regarding hatred of Israel's U.S.-backed genocide, and you damn well know it. We saw the same thing we talked about yesterday, or the last show, about the aid, the disaster aid. All right, what they do? Well, first they put in there that you couldn't boycott an Israeli company, or you wouldn't get funding for, disaster aid, even if you pay your taxes for it. They got caught, changed it, and said, you're lying. We didn't do that, even though literally everybody caught them doing it. As you can see the difference of the pages. Then they literally came out with a DHS post and said, you're crazy. We didn't do that. And then Twitter fact-checked them and said, you're being misleading. We know you deleted it. So, then they added it back later that day, which I covered on the show. Then the next morning, they just deleted the whole page because they're clearly not hiding anything, are they? It's the same stupid thing. The point the DHS post actually said was that whether or not that language is in there, we can still do it based on the idea that you're violating our hate speech laws, which are unconstitutional, by the way. Republicans would say that, of course, if it was about the left, but they keep their mouth shut largely when it comes to Trump. The problem is this, as you can read through it for yourself, will be applied in any way they want to around suppress. They're doing it right now. It's unconstitutional. So if you read the bill, rather the executive order, the reality is they make it about political or religious beliefs. So if you're going to claim me saying Palestine should be free is anti-Semitism, well, would you categorize that as political? No, they'll say it's hatred. Would you categorize that as religious belief? No, they'll say it's hatred. They'll say it's hate speech. They're carving this out to be, it's just like I said before. It's not pronouns and everything else, but it's the same thing, but with a finer tuned point, probably for what it's always been about. It's very obvious to me. Now, Index Red says I give Trump no credit for this. The executive order bans politicized or unlawful debanking. So even right there, you could argue they mean we'll do it in ways that are lawful, which is the same point. But it says defined as denying or restricting access to banking products based on political religious beliefs or lawful business activities the bank disagrees with for political reasons. Nowhere does it define what is a political belief. The executive order leaves enforcement to federal banking regulators. Great. And lets them decide if a denial is politicized or unlawful. So great. So they're deferring to the banks like Teal defers to Israel. Is that what you want? They're going to apply it the same way they do. As long as they can carve out something that they argue doesn't apply to those two things, it applies the same way. Language is always the way they get you. That means if a regulator or DOJ official decides your views are hate speech or not protected, they could say your debanked is justified as a risk-based decision, which the executive order explicitly allows. See, you don't need, it's just, I wouldn't assume I wouldn't assume anything like this. Well, none of us should. But based on their track record, this is what I kind of expected, the bait and switch administration. They do it with everything they've done so far. I mean, even with the fluoride, guys, they've now appealed the fluoride rule, the fluoride report that showed you it was dangerous. Trump's administration now appealed it. Despite their big thing they did and stood up and said they're going to look at it, they've appealed it, just like Biden did. We already covered that. Still bet you most Republicans don't know that. Now, DropSite News reports that Mike Johnson went to the West Bank, as we told you in the last show. But the point is the entire trip is tied to what the apocalypse. This is religious Zionism, the apocalyptic prophecy. Mike Johnson's recent visit to an occupied West Bank to an illegal location wasn't just political gesture. It's part of a years-long evangelical campaign tied to end times prophecy. Let's not forget, end times prophecy that religious Zionists believe starts with the collapse of the West. But America first, though, guys, America first. Ryan Grimm reports Johnson was personally supported by a movement to rebuild the Jewish Third Temple. Same point. which would require the destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Right. We've talked about this forever. My point is that that's what he's doing there while he's hiding from the Epstein files, while they're not working for you. Now, another point, by the way, about the Wailing Wall, plenty of people could disagree that they do it out of respect, whatever. But ask yourself this, why every single one of them takes a picture when they do it? Not the others, but take a picture. Well, isn't that a personal thing? Isn't it about you? No, it's about them going, look at me. It's obvious what that is. Imran Siddiqui says, this was the site where American settler Barak Goldstein massacred 29 praying Palestinians in 1994. Also currently the site where Mike Johnson's taking a picture with members committing genocide. America first. As Dave DeCamp points out, Netanyahu is borrowing our Congress during the recess. Guys, that's literally, and to be clear, as Ryan Grimm and others point out, the Democrats are coming next. It's not a secret. This is not normal, guys. This is insane. And what's even more insane is that people are finally starting to see it, which is crazy, but I'm very happy to hear it. Marjorie Taylor Greene she literally says, we bombed Iran on behalf of Israel. Now, just because she says it doesn't make it true, but I also believe it's true because the facts back that up. And I'm happy to raise this up, regardless of whether I think her intentions are true, because it's right. I think it's important to think about that people in Congress are now starting to tell you what they know, that this was all about Israel. Well, that's what we were telling you. Now, this is actually crazy. I mean, it's the same as all the rest of it, but it just continues to get more. My point, the reason I say it's crazy is that it's happening now when they know you're starting to call it out, which just continues to show you who they're working for. And that doesn't have to mean what people want to pretend it means. It simply means people progressing the Zionist agenda and doing so at the expense of American interests. U.S. Attorney for D.C. Interesting, by the way, D.C. We just talked about the federalizing D.C., the Freedom City overlap, giving it to Peter Thiel, and the weird thing with that guy, Big Balls, who got beat up, and that's the guy from Doge, and it's all weird how it all just, it's like, what a coincidence. Well, here she is. The attorney for D.C., Pirro, has threatened all the anti-Israel Americans. It's not about America first, guys. This is straight up unconstitutional.
Problem with anti-Semitism in this country, and the statistics bear that out. And I
know what they show you is that the ADL has used every Palestinian flag in the country to claim it's risen 400%. Same old stat we keep telling you that has been proven that even the ADL has had to acknowledge, yes, is Palestinian protest. These people don't care. She doesn't care. Either she's that easy to manipulate, that's stupid, or doesn't care that she's attacking American interest for a foreign country. Now, again, anti-Semitism, even if they're genuinely being racist, that is not something that's not a law. You're allowed to think and say what you want. That's a fact. Or we pretend that, don't we?
I think now more than ever.
Wait, I should be clear. Understand the Constitution is not something they can take away from you. It's inherent, God-given. Now, they can choose to not respect those rights, but it's never something they can legislate away, no matter what they say. And that is the reality of this from day one.
Ever bear that out. And I think in this country, and the statistics bear that out. And I think now more than ever, we are seeing increased numbers. So what does that mean? What it means, if you can get from, my tone, we're going to be very aggressive. You heard from the FBI, the MPD. We're going to look for these cases. We're going to prosecute these cases to the full force of the law. It's a problem.
Right. So we're going to prosecute you for speech, but only the speech that we deem offensive to Israel. Period. Right? You can come out and be racist against Muslims and Christians in America, or just hate America. They don't care. Even Miller was just called out for this. They love to make it about people who hate America. That's not what they're doing. There's not a single person who has been deported or removed for hating America. It's all been around Israel. But they claim that just therefore means they hate America too. It's just not. They don't even, in most cases, these people don't even hate Israel. It's about focusing on what matters, on ending the genocide, or calling out discrimination, or calling out the unconstitutional actions. These people don't work for you. They don't care about you. I should make a funny comment about the way she looks, but you could fill it in.
When we're not going to tolerate it. Anti-Semitism has historically been one of the biggest scabs in the world that keeps getting picked on and picked at. So from my perspective, I will go forward with every case with vengeance.
Now, the reality of this, guys, is these things have been going on for a long time. right? This is not something that's only happening today, right? And I believe that one's not even from immediately. The point is that clearly we're building into this direction where all of government stance, left and right, which is what it's always been, is about coming after you for Israel. Solomon Ahmed about this just expanded to the global point, just a couple of them. Ireland, one of the most historically, pro-Palestinian entities in the national discussion, or rather international discussion. U.S. is now threatening Ireland over boycotting Israel. Now, this is just so far beyond. So obviously, the U.S. government has arguably, they're supposed to protect our constitutional rights. They don't care, but we pretend that that's the case, right? This goes so far beyond that. Now they're saying other countries, Ireland, you're not allowed to boycott a group committing genocide. You, foreign country, which we have no jurisdiction over, we're gonna go after you. We're gonna throw tariffs at you. Like it's the same thing we saw with Canada. Trump came out and said we can't make a deal because you say Palestine's a state. All of this is immediately counter to U.S. interests for Israel. That is not America first. Even Matt Walsh and many other conservatives were screaming about that. Same point here. He says, quote, if you try to economically isolate Israel, you will bear the consequences. Trump is using America as a battering ram to support Israeli interests. U.S. Congress urges Treasury Secretary Bessent to investigate Ireland's proposed boycott. Investigate? In what world is it illegal to make decisions financially for what you want to boycott or not, or even just not work with? The idea that you're forced to work with this country regardless, or if you don't, you're racist, is insane. It's the same thing we're just talking about. People that don't take AIPAC money are racist. It's just like, that's an insane way to look at this. Quote, the United States must send a clear message that efforts to economically isolate Israel will carry consequences. Okay, can you economically isolate Iran? Sure. Can you economically isolate China, Russia? Absolutely. Can you economically isolate the UK, Germany? Anyone you want, but not Israel. It's just so stupid. This comes after the Trump administration threatens U.S. cities and states that they wouldn't receive federal aid if they boycotted Israel, which is still the reality, despite the screaming idiots in the mainstream alternative media. Representative Claudia Tenney says, if Ireland supports Hamas, I don't think that's the case. And BDS, that's just simply your legal right to boycott what you want. By boycotting Israel, the U.S. must enforce our anti-boycott laws. What? So now your laws apply to Ireland? Are these people that stupid, or are they just that are they megalomaniacs? Or are they just working for somebody else to protect U.S. companies? She says, I'm calling on Bessent to investigate Ireland's proposal. Okay, so quickly recognize her as somebody not working for American interests. Somebody called her and said, do this, right? This is the representative of the House. Where is it? Hold on. Trying to look at where area. New York. Okay. So the point is, this is somebody who is a New York representative. Okay. Why in the world is she even talking about something that Israel involved with, or Ireland? Why are you focusing on New York? Or if that, I believe that's where she is based on that hashtag, but I could be wrong. The point is, why aren't you focusing on your district? Why are you wildly outside of your mandate, your field of work to talk about Ireland and Israel? Because somebody in Israel who gave you money said, hey, Claudia, scream about this. Or you have to, or however you want to look at it. That's disgusting. It doesn't make any sense. And here, Disclosed TV points out, in case you missed it, U.S. Congress urges Secretary Bessent to investigate Ireland's proposed boycott. The United States must send a clear signal that efforts to economically isolate Israel will carry consequences. I don't need to even speaks for itself. If these people wanted to boycott UK, I'm sure there'd be a conversation about allies, but it would not look like this. Dear Bessent, we write to express our serious concerns regarding recent proposal by the government of Ireland to boycott Israel and urge the Department to examine the implications of the proposal under U.S. law. How do they think U.S. law applies to Ireland? Like, even if you want to talk about like the companies that overlap with Ireland, there's no legal avenue through which you can argue they have to do anything. You could pull your companies back and that would hurt American interests. That's the point. It says Section 999 of the the Internal Revenue Code. Now, look, this may overlap with that weird thing they were doing about like the revenue services for outside the United States. This is it has been insane for a long time. Reflects the United States' bipartisan commitment to opposing foreign boycotts of friendly nations, particularly Israel. So that they do that to make it seem like they don't do this for anybody else. The bipartisan commitment, very clear. Marjorie Taylor Greene stands up today, pointing that out, and says, what is happening? America's economic power and success should not be used as a blunt force weapon against other countries on behalf of Israel's economy. On top of that, they do, in general, Trump shouldn't be using tariffs coercively to force countries into positions he wants, regardless of whether it benefits the United States. That's just, it's economic warfare. It says, and look, I'm sure people disagree with that. My point is that if we want to build a world in a direction that we think is going to benefit even just American interests, then we should do that. Might makes right is not that direction. That is historically what's always caused the same things we always have got, and that are gotten, which is war, pushback. You economically manipulate that country, what do you think they're going to do back to you? You may want to ask yourself whether that would be the way the world is if this wasn't being forced on everybody. It says, and I'm a big supporter of dissent, worth considering, the massive Zionist dissent. He is working hard to level the playing field for America. I don't agree with that. But Congress, who is overwhelmingly controlled by multiple foreign governments, true, especially the secular government of Israel, is fighting for Israel first. Now, multiple governments, I don't believe that's the case. I think this is a way to water this down for hopes that maybe she can gain back AIPAC support, if you want my honest opinion. But what she's saying is correct, regardless of whether you think her intent is true. Was this about Somalia, Qatar, right? I mean, that's insane to argue. Or even the push recently, Charlie Kirk is like, CAR, that is like the most problematic thing in the world. Like, just look at the influence of AIPAC. Look at what Israel does. It's ridiculous to claim anything other than Israel is truly influencing U.S. policy. She says, I've given an example. I'm in Texas visiting my family, and I've talked to a lot of people. Beef is an all-time high, and I'm happy for the cattle ranchers because they got hurt a few years back from a big drought. However, that is hitting people hard in the checkout line of the grocery stores. The average American is barely getting by. Nothing new to that, guys. It's been that way for a while now, sadly. My confused colleagues are blinded and have forgotten their job, their title as representative. And I agree with some of what she's saying. I got to be honest. I don't feel like it's true. I think this is opportunism, but I'm more supportive nonetheless. Glenn Greenwald, to make it about the UK as well, which we all know. And funny how there was this major moment where it was about the UK and censorship, and it's all woke and bad, which is true. Funny how they're not really saying that right now. You know why, I think? Because it's become about Israel. Free speech effectively does not exist in the UK. Quote, armed police threatened to arrest Kent protester for holding Palestinian flag and a flag saying free Gaza, and Israel's committing genocide. Illegal ideas and opinions. That's it, guys. That's one of those anti-Semitic events. That's simply standing up for your rights against people committing genocide, whether they're Jewish or not. That's what's happening. Now, remember, Elon Musk and all the rest, when he was like charging the whole Twitter space, they were screaming about UK and ignoring what happened here. Why aren't they screaming about it still? It's still happening. I think you know why. Megatron points out, Trump to the countries of the Middle East. Join the Abraham Accords and protect Israel if you want peace in the Middle East. Speaks for itself. Trump has openly announced that to the countries that they will never have peace if they don't obey Israel. Now, that's the way he frames it, but that's generally the point. Probably the point where it's like, we won't let you have peace unless you do it. That's how it's been going the whole time. Quote, it is very important. This is quote, to me, that all the countries in the Middle East join the Abraham Accords. This will ensure peace in the Middle East, he said on Truth Social. Now, that's not the way you spell that. That's like insurance, but the point is E with an E. Something that clearly indicates that Israel is the cause of the wars in this region. We all know this. We all know this by now. We should, anyway. Now, here's a clip that's going to bother you, and I'll play this really quickly. It's only 40 seconds, and it's exactly what we're talking about. Here's Alan Dershowitz going to some random Martha's Vineyard farmer's market. Apparently, he's been making a big deal about this one guy forever and trying to force him to sell him food, even though he's saying, I won't sell food to people who are Zionists. Certainly sounds familiar, doesn't it? Let's take a listen.
World stands one for anti-Zionists and one for people who will sell to anybody. So I'd ask you to please just sell me any one of your products to show that you're prepared to sell to anybody and not allow your anti-Zionism to decide which people will sell. You'll sell to.
Ethan, this man is calling me an anti-Zionist.
Excuse me, this man is a saint.
I also
A saint.
offer you this book, which
No, thank you. No, thank you.
I signed it to you.
Alan,
To Krem, please learn the truth.
Thank you so
Why don't
much,
read the
Alan.
Constitution?
Thank you so much. I am very surprised that you're here because of the things that you've been saying about us and the business.
No, just you. Yeah.
Online.
He admits it. Just you. Okay. First, before we even get into the overlap, here's what this guy says. Michael Knowles says, Alan's completely in the right here. Right. By forcing someone to sell them food that they don't want to sell them because of a political opinion. Gee, don't we have a precedent for that? Haven't we talked about this before? He ruins these insufferable libs, this moron, and takes all their pierogies. Okay. So in the first sense, do you feel that you should be obligated to sell food to somebody that you don't agree with? Sure seems to be your right, doesn't it? We have this whole thing about, constitutional rights, but then it overlaps with the whole, what is it called again? The woke idea of, like, what did they frame this as? Like, the bottom line is that there's perspectives out there that say that that's discrimination, right? That you're not, but you own this business and you could do what you want with it. I can decide I want to sell you this because you got red shoes on and I hate red shoes. That's the reality, guys. Now, you know where this is going because this already happened. That's right. Supreme Court upholds Baker's right to disagree with gay marriage in marketplace. Remember when this was like the whole thing? Oh, the Republicans are going, how dare you can't make me? Yeah, right. Remember that? Funny how weird these things swing around. And now we're watching the woke right do the same damn thing. Now realize he's not considered a Republican. The point though is this is from a Republican perspective. The idea of forcing these stupid libs, as he says right there, to take because it's all about left versus right? Children. This guy's a maniac, by the way. Dershowitz is very clearly, I think this is a stunt trying to distract from everything else going on, part of it anyway, but really just to force the idea that everyone in this country hates Jews. That's all it's about, right? Or is it about the fact that everyone supporting the genocide is somebody they don't want to be associated with, or that they have a right to not sell food to people that they don't want to support? I mean, it's just insane how blind it can be when people are on one side versus the other. It just makes me sad that we have to be this ridiculous about it all, that it can't be that obvious that we've already set the idea that you guys made the argument, and now here we are where it's okay because you're doing it. Sort of like when Live to TikTok got that person fired from Home Depot because they made a bad joke about Trump being whatever you want to call it, what happened in Butler. Think about that. She said, I wish he was a better shot, or too bad he was a better shot, is what she said. Sure. That's bad taste. It's not against the law to say that, regardless of what the implication is. And what did they do? Doxed her, went after her, got her fired from her job as some random middle, person who I don't actually know, but the point is probably somebody who was just getting by at her job, and they hated her for it. How is that different than the left? It's not. But we'll leave it there today. Very important stuff, I think, overall. I think that what we're seeing today is just continuing to show you that we're on a positive path as much as it continues to feel chaotic. Things are changing. People are seeing these things, but you got the government trying to desperately scare you into place. You got the mainstream alternative media screaming their heads off to maintain their cash train or gravy train. And in the process, trying to convince you how dumb you are, how lost you are, how you're missing everything, how dare all the libs are distracted. It's dangerous, but it's going in the right direction. I think we can see that. The direction is truth, guys. And sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. But if you want truth, then we're going in the right direction. Keep fighting for it. Now, I'll leave you with a clip that you've seen before, but the idea of understanding who's been driving all these wars and all the different things that we've seen, it's obvious where this is coming from, and it's about time that we put a stop to it. Thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
This starts, and it's really fascinating to go back. It starts in 1996 with Netanyahu, who wrote a book called Fighting Terrorism. And the thesis of the book is quite straightforward and very dangerous. He says, there's Hamas, there's Hezbollah, they oppose Israel. It's not good for us to fight them directly. that won't work. What we need to do is topple the governments that back them. So what we need is regime change throughout the Middle East. And he actually gave a long list of 7 countries that included Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and Lebanon. And systematically, the United States has done Netanyahu's bidding for almost 30 years now, going to war with every one of them except for the big one that Netanyahu so much longs for, which is the war directly between the United States and Iran.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."